Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Wired In, a podcast presented by KONTEK. So today we are going to be talking with Marcus Manning yet again. Thank you for joining, Marcus. We are going to be talking about something I have been looking forward to for months since we started talking about this, is stop buying AV equipment on Amazon. And there's a lot of reasons for this, and I want to get into this. I'm so excited about this episode. But funny enough, Marcus, you said that your microphone you bought on Amazon for this 100%,
podcast. Man.
Talk to me about this,
microphone, my camera, actually, my capture card, right? So
that's great.
When I say stop buying things on Amazon, there's no knock against an online reseller of reputable brands, right? Okay. This really the core of the issue is not so much that I found this particular manufacturer who's well known in the professional or commercial, AV space, and they happen to have an Amazon store. Perfectly fine. Where we see things, coming up that cause interference or cause problems with issues and systems is when we say, hey, I am strictly going out to this online platform to get the cheapest thing I can get that says it will do what I want it to do and introduce that to my commercial environment. So when I say stop buying things on Amazon, I don't want to be super hypocritical because, again, I have bought several things on Amazon and I love them. They're wonderful. They work great. But again, it's using my experience in the industry to look for the manufacturers that I know and trust and find their products that are going to work for my specific application.
And there's a distinction that you're bringing up, which is why I wanted to start there. And the distinction is when you're talking about there's personal use, perhaps, or very limited low risk use. And then there's commercial grade, high quality, you need this thing to work. And buying the cheapest option on Amazon for that, the commercial grade setup is not good. And you have an example of this with an HDMI cord. Talk to me about this.
I do. So earlier this year, either late last year, we were wrapping up a large scale project for a wonderful client. This building is amazing. I have to give the architects, the internal designers, a lot of credit. It integrates really well into the wooded environment. I mean, this building is beautiful. So with that, they have several spaces. They want to do, high-end conferencing and combine and divide spaces and building-wide music and all these things. It's actually a revenue-generating space, and it's used for training and all these things. So the space, awesome space. So one day, we're wrapping up everything. I said, hey, we always love training. So gather everyone up. Let's do some quick training and talk about any issues, any question marks you may have, just to make sure, all the users are very comfortable with the space because they're responsible for also helping train other folks that come in to use the space. So I go in and keep in mind, I am a technician at heart. So when I leave my home, I always have cables on me in my car. I just have certain gadgets all the time. I never leave home without them. And I happened to get there that day. Everyone's there, grab a cup of coffee, and we're saying, hey, how's it going? I said, Marcus, perfect timing. We're ready for the training. We're all set up. The system doesn't seem to be working. I said, really? That's interesting. I talked to the commissioning team and put the bells and whistles in place, and everything should be good to go. But you know what? I'm here. Let me check it out for you. So as soon as I walk in the room, the first thing that catches my eye is I see they have a really long HDMI cable that they've draped across the floor because they do different configurations. And, that's how they want to be able to do things. They didn't want floor boxes. They wanted just something in the wall. No problem there. No judgment. But when I glance at the cable really closely, I see that it looks like a little braided, cool looking HDMI cable. So in my mind, immediate red flag. Like, wait, I know we did not give them this cable. We provide all kinds of patch cables for folks. We leave things behind so you have them. I know it's not one of ours, but no judgment, try to be judgment free. So I walk over with my laptop, connect up, basic troubleshooting, fire everything up. No signal on the displays. There's 2 displays in the room. No content. I said, well, this is very interesting. In my heart of hearts, I already have a strong feeling. The problem is this cable. So what I do is, and literally I have cables on me all the time, and I had a 30-foot HDMI cable on my person for one of our trusted manufacturers. So I say, hey, give me 1 second. I just lay my cable across the ground beside their cable, patch it into my computer. Immediately signal comes up everywhere. They say, Marcus, what'd you do? I didn't do a thing. I said, all I did is I used a proper cable. And after that, the IT team was there. Some of their AV support folks were there. And I started asking, like, hey, just for my own knowledge, where'd you get this cable from? Because I'm sure we didn't leave you with something like this. They said, oh, we went out on Amazon because we wanted another cable and we found this for $8. And they were really happy about that $8 spend. And I said, hey, folks, again, no knock on where you bought it from, because there's some reputable manufacturers out there and they sell through Amazon. I said, however, if you buy a 30-foot HDMI cable and you spend $80, you are most likely going to run into trouble. And I said, this is not all marketing hype. Do you need a triple gold-plated HDMI cable? No, you don't. Do you need something that can pass 4K? And when you start doing the math on the pixel count and the actual amount of bandwidth, and you have the proper pins and all the technologies involved, then it starts to matter. So, in our case, I just gave them a few recommendations on, hey, here are the manufacturers we trust and we use. I'd recommend you buy any cables here. So they said, well, what should we do with the cable we bought? My honest recommendation is send it out for e-cycling or dispose of it properly. Like, don't ever patch it in again, because again, thinking about the real cost of this and what could have happened. Say you had a client, because you rented the space out, they were coming in to use the room. All of a sudden, what is that experience they're going to have? Because very simple to use. Hit the power button, they plug in, no signal. They're trying to figure out what's wrong. Is it my laptop? Is it this? Is it that? So how much time are you spending? How much confidence has that client lost or that user of the room lost? Then you're potentially losing revenue, because now you have to move them to another space. Do you have to postpone a meeting? All of this over an $8 cable. And so I always warn folks, these things do matter. All cables are not created equal. Some will say, well, it's digital, it's on or it's off. That is not quite true. If it was that simple, it'd be great. And, there wouldn't be a problem with these cables. When we start talking about high bandwidth applications, folks that want 4K or even now 8K and all these things, it really does matter. Can that cable do what it says? And in our case, we believe in trusting but verifying. So when we need to select cable manufacturers, we actually test them. We buy our own cables. We don't rely on, a salesperson to send us a free batch. We just order them like everyone else. And then we have special equipment, cable testers, so we can actually push content of different types, different HTCP configurations, all these things through these cables. And then we make our notes about what passes, what fails, what throws an error code. And that's what drives our recommendations on the manufacturers we use for cabling. And it's just one of those things where, you can do all these advanced configurations in IT and AV, but if you cheap out on your category cabling, well, all of a sudden now you're having hiccups and things aren't working. So that's why, I always say, please, for the love of all things technology related, do not just go out and search up the cheapest thing you can find on Amazon and patch it into your commercial system. It's typically a recipe for a headache, and there could be sometimes, a bit of disaster involved as well.
What I love is you have let's say $500,000 system, and all that goes involved with that, all the design, all the consultation, all the implementation, all the actual like hardware and software, and it fails because of an $8 decision. And I just love that contrast. And I think it highlights a really important theme, which is, and you kind of hinted at it earlier, which is total cost of ownership. If you think about different projects, whether you're thinking about it's a $500,000 project and maybe we can shave a few $1,000s here or there. What is the impact of that overall? Like you said, trust or timelines or, thinking long term that this system is set up properly to last 5-10 years, and that whole investment decision that you're making amortized over that time schedule, it can be a lot up front, but it's going to work and it's going to make sure that it lasts for a very long time. Whereas if you go with the cheap option, it doesn't. And I just find that so fascinating that it is a long-term play and you got to do it right up front.
Yeah. In our space, oftentimes we have a thing in our office, we kind of joke about it. We say value engineering. And I always reframe it as, hey, what do you really not need out of your system? Because when you start trying to cut strictly based on dollars and costs and things like that, without really looking at the overarching usability, functionality, that's when you start getting yourself into a little bit of trouble. And the best plan we always see is like, hey, can we dial the system back? Do we not need every single function? Because there are the wants, what you want your system to do. And there are the needs about what are the bare bones that we have to have this room or this thing do. And I also want to caution folks, we're not discussing this just in the framework of technology solutions, right? We see it all the time. We talk about building materials, construction techniques, architectural design. If you have a room that's designed for conferencing, awesome. There's technology that's going to enable that. However, if you decide I need to save money. I'm going to not have my walls go up to the deck. Okay, I'm going to save money again. I'm going to get some materials, some tiles, whatever it may be, that have a lower NRC rating, so for noise reduction, things like that. A lower rating typically means lower cost. Well, what you just did in making that decision is you now have created a space where ambient sound will penetrate into the space. So sound will flow in and will flow out, and that makes it more difficult to achieve your end goal, which is having a really high quality conference space. There are scientific kind of rules and standards that apply to these rooms and these spaces that say, hey, your ambient noise should not eclipse this level. That your reflectivity in the room should not be greater than this. And that's what guides us as we get into the technology side of this, because to be completely honest with folks, you cannot fix through technology what has happened through construction and architecture, right? And we try to be upfront and honest about that. There's no system we're going to sell you that is going to defeat the construction techniques that we're using, erecting this room or putting up this building or any of that. That's just not what it does, right? And so that's a longer consideration when you think about the long-term ownership of the entirety of the building. How many complaints will you have because, hey, I'm beside Bob and Bob is a really loud talker. Every time Bob is on a phone call, I can just hear him very clearly. Hey, that gets back to construction. How was your building created and what did you give up? In the beginning to cut the cost down, but now you have this ongoing problem that you're going to now throw more money at trying to resolve. So that's just how you look at the entirety of the system, a holistic view of a building, including, the walls, the ceiling, and the technology.
Okay, so what I want to hit on there is, this is not Marcus or KONTEK having high quality standards and you guys like to do a certain way. This is like physics. Like, I can't mess with physics, whether it's the noise, whether it's the height of something or how long this is going to stretch or the bandwidth or whatever. I mean, this is just the way the world works, literally, and down to a particle level. Can't argue with that,
No, sometimes we'll look at things and we'll just have the joke of, hey, that math ain't mathing. I don't care how you try to explain it. That math is not mathing, so this is not going to be a successful implementation.
That's right. And so I think that highlights a certain theme that we've had for a couple episodes is really you want to bring in the team as early as possible. When you guys are thinking about a space, and it's especially, the more expensive the space is or the dream that you have for it, bring in somebody early. Let's talk through this because these details matter.
Absolutely. 100% they matter. And again, everything is more expensive at the end of the project, right? If we can catch it early, we can discuss it, we can design for it, we can work with everyone involved in the project. All right, we have a plan versus, hey, all the walls are up, the building is finished, we have to add something now. Okay, well now we're cutting open walls or we're cutting open ceiling. No one wants to go back and core drill a floor when you could have done it, in the initial concrete pour. So all of those things, if you don't catch them early, they can rapidly spiral. And we're not just talking about the cost. What is that experience like for the project manager, for the building owner, for all these other groups involved? We're like, man, we have to go back and keep redoing work over and over again. So now you get into the change order process and, who's at fault. So it starts to really spiral if you don't catch these things early.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I think, thinking about price versus quality and things like that is, you've been doing this a very long time. Your team's been doing this a very long time. You guys are experts. You've made the mistakes before. You've seen 1,000 different variations of this problem. And if part of what you're paying for is people that have that collected knowledge and wisdom, and they're not just falling for marketing hype, like, oh, this cable looks cool, it's braided, or it's got gold plated, tassels on it or whatever. But it's like, no, I know this thing is going to work because I've done this 100 times. That value has to translate into your work. And obviously it shows up in the bottom line, but the total cost of that project can balloon if you don't do those right things early up front.
Correct, 100%. And then there's also additional hidden costs in the future. We've seen, unfortunately, for clients where all of a sudden they had a failure later on, say within 18 months of opening a new space. And when we saw the equipment that was put in, it got back to, they made a decision to, reduce the overall upfront costs in the very beginning of the project. Well, now, there's some components that did not make it to the typical life cycle of a product. So you're replacing them early. So now you spent twice on the same solution versus going in with a high quality solution from the very beginning that would last, has a great warranty in the event that it does fail, and you would have been covered for 5 years versus now in 18 months, I'm having to go and replace, 18 touch panels to control my system because they failed.
that stuff can add up. I want to bring this back down to like maybe kind of a personal level. Anybody that's listening, I'm sure has done this, where you buy a printer or a monitor, and maybe it's like a decent brand, and of course you get it through Amazon or Best Buy or some of these retail locations, something like that. And for whatever reason, it just yes, there's a $300 printer, but you bought the $100 one, and that one actually ends up failing a year from now or 5 years from now, or it's just a headache. Anybody that's dealt with printers knows it's a headache. Whereas if you just bought the $300 one, it actually would last. It's got warranties. There's customer support that you can actually call and talk to. I think about this with my display, where I bought a Dell display. It's very nice. But there's some particular things inside the display that I don't understand, but like drivers and the ports and the connections and all of that. And I wish that I actually just spent twice the money on like an Apple Studio display, which is a very expensive, very nice display, but it would last for 10 years and I would probably never have a problem with it. It would just work. I plug in whatever I want into that thing and it would work because of all these little tiny components that I don't even understand are all within it. Am I talking about the same thing? I know this is commercial versus kind of personal use, but is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, 100%, right? 100%. We see it in, products all the time where all of a sudden, we do a lot with LED walls. So you think, really large, bright billboards you see nowadays on the road and everything else. So with LED walls, if you have a lower end manufacturer, they're using different techniques, different materials, yes, it will be cheaper. But what does it actually look like? Is the coloration correct? Do the panels fail? We had a product, and this was for a reputable manufacturer. They started having pixel failures probably every week. And we were just blown away by like, hey, there's a manufacturing issue. There's something going on. But it was also a lower tier, a slightly lower tier from a known manufacturer. And so I always caution people, was like, hey, you're going to pay for this somewhere, some way. This is going to come back to bite you. But it's the same concept. And to make it really hit home for people, I always put it in the terms of computers, right? And I am the only technical person in my immediate family, so I deal with this a lot. But when it comes time to get a new laptop, a new desktop, whatever you need, people always ask people, well, what do you do? My first question is always, what do you want to do with said computer, right? And depending on what you say to me, I'll say, okay, well, your budget should probably be this. So love my mom. She works in science, really smart about, transgenics and gene cloning. Computers aren't her thing. So I say, hey, Mom, you probably want to budget about, $1,800 or so, maybe $2,500, and it'll last for a really long while. Sticker shock immediately. Like, what are you talking about? I shouldn't pay that much. I said, well, let's put this in easy terms. Today, you can go out to the store and you can buy a $400 computer. You really can. The second you're going to create PowerPoints, or you're trying to edit video, or you're trying to edit audio, it's not going to work. And you're going to be upset with the computer, where the computer isn't the problem, right? The computer for $400 was not designed for that workload and that workflow. Yes. It's just not. It's designed for maybe checking some email, surfing the web, watch some Netflix, right? So if you're doing advanced video editing, or you're working in CAD or any of these applications that are really, heavy use, well, yeah, your starting point is probably about $2,500, and you're going to get a machine that will last. It will be able to actually handle the work you want to deal with on a daily basis, versus something that's just not going to work for you, or it'd be incredibly slow and all these things happen. So that's the simplest terms, because that really applies to everything that we touch in the technology space. You can extend that out to more just in your life, but that's the easy example I use for folks. Is just when it's time to buy a computer, do not think, okay, I want to spend $500. Always think, well, what do I need to do?
That's right. I can confirm I have lived that lesson the hard way. So this last computer I bought, it was $3,000. And I knew I had to do that because if I'm going to be editing video, and 4K video at that, and exporting and all this, I have learned the hard way that it takes me 10 times longer to do than if I just paid the money for the nice one and I can get it done, move on to the next thing, and it's going to work. So yeah, totally understand that. Okay, well, how does this translate down into your team? So you talked about how you guys have like a QA, QC process on some of these tools and things like that. What are some other things that you guys do to make sure that all of the, the designs, or the, consultation period, the project management, the QC, QA kind of process, testing things, how does all this like translate into KONTEK when you guys are living your kind of daily work life?
Yeah, it's like I said, it starts with the dream. What's the user want to do, and then we start building it out. And what we do a lot in our office is we talk about what's known to work. Right? We'll have conversations. We do a lot of testing. Yes, we have manufacturers come in. We always demo products, and this is just one of those cases where someone can tell me anything about a product. Great, sounds awesome. Send it to me. Let's set it up in our test space. Let's have it running. Let's send content through it. Let's do all these different things and allow different groups to interact with it. Maybe our sales team, they're a little bit less technical than our design team. So, hey, just go in here and play around with it. And is it very intuitive? Do you just automatically understand how to do it? For install, if we're looking at maybe speakers, they may look at the speaker and say, oh, that would be awful. It's going to take us 1x times the amount of time to install this other speaker. Hey, that's a great note because that drives up costs. All right, well, how's the sound quality? Do they sound good? Lots and lots of shootouts. So a lot of what happens behind the scenes, it gets back to just testing products, training, lots of training, going through classes, taking training, and not just manufacturer training, but also industry specific, third party type coursework to really hone in on the skills we need to even understand what a manufacturer's saying to us. When they say there's a new product, okay, well, what does this do for my users? What issue is this solving? What problem is it solving? Right? If it's not solving a problem, then I don't necessarily have a need for it right now, but it's great to have those things in your back pocket. So when you are listening to what someone wants to do, you're like, you know what? We have an idea for you. We have a concept in mind, and it just makes that process flow, and it feels more natural. So that's one of the biggest things, and how that really impacts what we're doing around the office, just on a daily basis. We can shout out to our support team. They may say, hey, we put these in the field, and man, this never happens, but this thing is overheating and almost catching on fire. Hey, well, we definitely don't want to specify that, and let's talk about it, and let's set it up, and let's run it, stress test it, run content through it, or have a camera just streaming for 48 or 72 hours straight nonstop and see what happens. Wow. Because that's what happens. That's one of the benefits of commercial products versus consumer products. It kind of trails into why we always stay on the commercial side. There are rules and regulations and things that people don't think about, as far as things like, is it going in a plenum space, and all these technical things you have to know. But just how things are built, a commercial display has fans and different components, and it's designed to last much, much longer than a display. You're just going to go down to your box store, pick it up, and throw it up on the wall. Just by doing that, you avoided the warranty anyway. If you take a display meant for consumer use and you put it into a commercial environment, you've already avoided the minimal warranty you would have had in the first place, which is probably 90 days parts and labor.
Interesting. I did not know that. Okay.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Everything has a purpose. A typical commercial display would have a warranty that's 3 to 5 years. Right? Easily 3 to 5 years. Something you just buy at the store. If you look at the fine print, which is why they sell you the additional warranties, right? Like, oh, you get the service plan. It's another 3 years. That's why they're selling it to you, because your typical warranty for consumer products, 90 days at best. But yes, the second you put it into a commercial application, you've basically voided that warranty.
Interesting. It makes me think of my fridge. And a year later, one of the fans went out. There's like 6 fans in a fridge. Who knew?
Yeah.
And I bought one. And of course, it was like a week after the warranty expired and went out. So I went to Amazon and I bought a fan. And a year later, it went out again because it was a cheap fan. And I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm buying. But yeah, it's like, man, I should have just bought some dang $10,000 Sub-Zero fridge or whatever. Even though the guy told me, he was like, they're all not. They all have issues, whatever. But anyway, that's
there's nothing perfect.
Yeah,
there's no perfect product, but there are things that are reputable and they will last, and they have a great track record of being stable. Right? That's what we want. We're doing when you're going to spend this kind of money and make this kind of investment in your building. You want things that are going to be long lasting and work and be consistent. There's nothing worse. And you may have the best IT and AV support team known to man. Do they want to have to go into a room every day and reboot it at 7:30 a.m. to make sure it's working properly, or reconnect the cable or disconnect something? Because again, what's the cost of that? What's that hidden cost of that hour spent every day trying to troubleshoot a system?
That's right. Lord knows those people have other things to be doing.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's right. No, I love that. I love that you guys spend so much time on that. And I think that's something that, thinking about the budget, price, value kind of conversation is you guys have a test environment. You bring in the sales team because they're going to be, probably a lot more like the end users that are going to be in that space. They're not technical. They don't understand all the components. They're not going to all these trainings in that way. So I love that. I thought that's a great note. And all of that combines into wisdom and expertise that overall is going to make a much, much better project long term.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's, we work in technology. There is something new. It feels like every weekly basis.
Gosh, yeah.
And a lot of times the pressure is, can I be first to market? Is it that initial speed to just get my product out there? First to market, it feels like, this is completely subjective, often feels like first to failure sometimes. It's like, hey, I'd rather have something that a little bit more testing done, a little bit more robust. And, I can't remember the magazine, but they did a great article where they actually did x-rays of USB-C cables to actually prove a point of like, hey, these are not all created equally. The components and the pins, and it's all different.
Yeah, I think I did see that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a really cool article if you really understand what they're getting at, because, if you can have two USB-C cables. They look identical to you. One, if you hook it up, okay, my display shows up. My laptop connects to my display, I can see everything. If you use the other cable, you have no signal. Well, come to find out, the other cable is only meant to pass power, whereas cable B can pass video and audio and power and Ethernet and yada, yada, yada. So it's just one of those things where you really have to stay on top of what's happening and, see what changes are coming, how does it work. And with USB-C, it's like the Wild West right now anyway. There's not a ton of, there are markings that do mean something, but every manufacturer kind of markets it or brands it their own way. So it's really hard without going deep into the specs to understand, like, okay, what will this USB-C cable do? And yeah, you'll have one and literally you're fighting saying, well, something's wrong with my display. Nope.
Yeah.
It's your USB-C cable. That's it. It was $5. Go with a $25 cable.
This is so fascinating. I have had all these issues so many times and I never know what's going on. So I feel like I've learned so much. So basically, don't trust the cool looking one. Even if it is cooler looking, it may not actually be the thing that you need.
Correct.
That's great. Okay. Okay. Any other final thoughts to leave listeners with as they're considering, thinking about a large AV project like this and want to do things the right way, and not maybe the first way, but the best way?
Yeah, it would only be, trusted partners, right? That's who you lean on, because none of us know everything about every topic. It'd be impossible. You'd be learning for the rest of your life. You'd never do anything. So, find someone you can lean on, that you can really trust, that's also knowledgeable, and even ask them, how do they train, right? How do you enhance your knowledge? In some trades, you're required to. You have continuing education credits and things of that nature. When it comes to technology, it's not always mandatory. There are governing bodies that say, hey, to have these certifications, you have to get this many hours of training yearly. But I would say, make sure you do that. I have smart cousins. My cousins are really smart. It doesn't mean I'm going to trust my cousins to design my AV system because they set up their home theater, right?
Yeah,
it's a little bit of a different skill set. And so I just say, lean on the folks that have a lot of time invested, and that do it for a living and that love to do it, because that's who will really help you out to really understand the design elements and what's going to be required at the beginning of your project. So when you get to the end, everyone can be happy.
I love that. That's perfect. Marcus, thank you for you listening out there or watching on YouTube. Please subscribe, find new episodes that are coming out on any platform that you're looking for: Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, YouTube, of course. Follow us on social and go to kontek.com for a lot more insights that are coming your way about this. Marcus, thank you.
Awesome.
I'll see you next time.
Thanks.